You're listening to a podcast of Master Your Finances with me, Kurt Baker, a certified financial planner professional. Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. on 1077thebronx.com. Good morning and welcome back to another edition of Master Your Finances, presented by Certified Wealth Management and Investment. I am Kurt Baker, certified financial planner professional. I'm located in Princeton, New Jersey, and can be reached through our website, which is www.cwmi.us. You can call me directly at 609-716-4700. This week, very happy to have back with us Peter Crowley, who's the president and CEO of the Princeton Mercer Regional Chamber of Commerce. It is the largest chamber in the Princeton-Mercer area and one of the largest chambers in New Jersey, with over 1,400 business partners and 8,000 individual member contacts. Prior to assuming his responsibilities at the chamber, he was the founding president and CEO of the Bank of Princeton and founding board member of the bank. During his 25 years as a senior banking executive, Peter held positions as senior vice president of Bank of America's Commercial Middle Markets Banking Group, senior vice president and private managing director with Citibank, senior vice president and managing director, investment services, PNC Bank, and president of Mid-Atlantic Investment Services. And Peter, we're very pleased to have with you. And I know you've been in the area since like 1981, so you know the area really well. And I met you just not too long after you had come on board with the chamber. And we had a little group over in Plainsboro that we called the like a little get together. We hung out and we're trying to deal with each other, and we got a little big, and we were going to either have to close down or do something. So I know that they were talking to you guys, and you kind of absorbed us a little bit, right? And brought us in as a group. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, how you're like initially getting into the chamber? Because you've done a lot. The chamber has grown significantly since you came. I know that. So what got you interested in being part of the chamber? And then what were those early days like as far as kind of coming into this new area, I think, because you're a banking guy, right?
Good morning, Chris. Yeah, I am. And, it's an interesting switch going from banking, having started the Bank of Princeton and being the founding CEO and president, to going to a new environment, which is nonprofit. So, give you a little background. So 30 plus years in the banking industry, most of it in New York with Citibank, a number of very different roles. Had the unique opportunity to start the Bank of Princeton back in 2005. And something I always wanted to do, did that, got up and running, and we were the fastest growing de novo bank, or one of the fastest growing de novo banks in New Jersey. And then around 2009, I wanted to do something different. And it just so happened there was an opening at the Princeton Regional Chamber. And the funny story is my kids came back to me and said, "Gee, Dad, you wanted something different. Here's a great opportunity to go into something. People know you in the Princeton area." So I applied, and I was fortunate enough to get it. And what I found was running a nonprofit is really no different than running a business. You need to make money to pay your staff. You need to bring a value to your clients, and you need to listen a lot. So when I did start moving in 2009, the one thing I wanted to do was change the model a little bit. Our model was really focused on traditional chamber events, a gala, a golf outing, but our client base was much different. And our client base was really a number of the business segments in our region. So you had the real estate segment, you had global segment, you had young professionals, you had a women in business segment. So what we did was we sort of looked at what Gillette and Procter & Gamble and others have done. And we set up a model that said, okay, the chamber is a holding company. That's the brand. But under that brand, we set up separate individual programs. Women in Business is called WIBA. Our Real Estate Business Alliance is called REBA. We actually set up 10 different programs over a period of probably 5 years. And that allowed us to not only grow the chamber dramatically, in fact, we've been the fastest growing chamber in the state for a number of years, but it allowed us over time to really start to reach out to companies that hadn't been involved in the chamber because they said, "What do I get out of it?" But now they say, "Well, we get things for our women in our business programs at the company," or it was real estate or residential or commercial. And that segmentation strategy made all the difference and allowed us to grow from a relatively small localized chamber at about $500,000 with 400 clients to now the largest regional chamber in the state with over 1,400 clients and over 8,000 contacts.
No, that summed it up great. And I think what was interesting to me is, and that's how we kind of got involved, is you were always on the lookout for kind of like the opportunities that might be out there. And I know you're always looking for input from us, like things we could try, because I know you've tried. It's not like you try everything and everything works, right? So
No,
you come up with ideas, right? And then you
right?
kind of vet them amongst yourself. Can you kind of go through that process? Because I mean, looking back from my perspective, I've been there through the whole process, so to speak, and watched everything happen. Everybody would think coming in today, wow, you just grew this thing and no problem, right? But there were steps along the way, and I just like for you, if you could, just kind of walk us through the process of kind of having an idea, deciding whether or not to roll it out, and then whether to let it continue or whether maybe to when do you stop if you don't think it's really maybe this isn't going to work out the way we thought, right? So just kind of if you could walk me through that process or walk us through that process a little bit.
Yeah, let me work with the Real Estate Business Alliance because that's sort of similar to what happened. So one of our members, actually her name was Christine Kernan. She worked for Signature Title Company. She has since come on as our vice president. Came and said, Peter, I think you really need to build a program around real estate. And I said, okay, well, help me understand that. And so she sat down and said, well, you've got commercial real estate, you've got residential real estate, and all the industries that support that. She said, no one's doing anything to bring those groups together. So I was a little hesitant because I thought it'd be really tough to blend commercial with residential. And Christine took the lead as being the chair of the committee, which is always a nice thing when someone has a good idea. Christine put together a committee, and over 6 months, we sat down and talked about the opportunities to bring clients value, opportunity to bring some revenue in, and what that program would look like. And after about 6 months, we launched it. And we launched the first meeting was probably about 100 people. And clearly we were onto something because it was oversubscribed. Since then, Christine or that program has become one of the leading real estate programs in Central Jersey. We do a real estate forecast every January with over 450 attendees, both commercial real estate, residential real estate, but as well as the industries that support it, title companies, law firms, tech firms. And that's pretty much contingent on what we've done with all of our programs. The cool thing is none of the programs were my idea. They were all ideas that came from our members who said, we think there's a need. We think the chamber can be a real strong advocate for that need. And then the person who brought it to me usually was the leader that developed that program. And I'm proud to say that those 10 programs, right now we have 10 of them, are really the linchpin of how we've been able to grow so quickly. Because in the past, you might have had a company that said, well, gee, I don't really know what a chamber does for me. But now I say, if they're a real estate company, they know what we can do with them. We bring value to the real estate side. If they're a global company, we bring value to our global side. Plainsboro Business Partnership, which you mentioned earlier, was another program that we were active in, and it was really sort of floundering. And we talked to the mayor over in Plainsboro, and he was advocating we work with him, and we did. And that program, became a real strong program for local businesses in downtown Plainsboro. We do one with Trenton through the mayor and economic development series, 3 or 4 events every year, focusing on the targeted opportunities that economic development brings to our Trenton region. So it's a real wide open organization. But I think you mentioned earlier, we treat it as a business organization, and that's why we've been so strong in our growth.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I know Christine's brought up a few times at our membership meetings, and I think that was highlighted by the real estate and business launching, is that sometimes one of the concerns that I remember hearing was people in real estate, other realtors aren't going to want to network with other realtors because they're competitors. And I think what people learned, and I think a lot of us have been around in business, realize is that really it's great to network among your peers. Sometimes people think that because they have a similar business that you have, that you can't work together, when in fact we don't all do exactly the same thing. And you want to explain like that whole process, because I think some people don't really completely understand the value of talking to your peers or what you view as might be your competitors, right? Because you may actually be working for them someday, or they may work for you someday. So
well, I mean, there's no better industry to refer to than the banking industry, which is where I grew up. And when I started the Bank of Princeton, there were a half dozen other banks in the area. And you not want to compete with them. You want to be unique in how you bring services. But we work on loans together. We all know each other. And you're right. Someday you may work for the person that you know. I was very happy to see that Christine was on target with the residential real estate folks. And what they learned was they all had their own niche, but they all worked together, and being able to share ideas, it worked out really, really well. It's similar as our Women in Business. I mean, that was another program we started. We now have the largest women's program in the state, our New Jersey Commerce for Women. But what you found were women wanted to share and network together, and they do it differently than men do. They're more they work better in teams. Men sometimes don't work as well in teams. And we were able to bring those values together too. So I think it's the diversity of what we do, of the diversity of our programs. Where Christine is launching, I believe it's going to be in August, no, I'm sorry, September, the first Diversity Inclusion Summit. And again, that came from people who came into us and said, we really want the chamber to take a lead in helping us become better at diversity, helping us understand the value of being diverse. And that's become a great program for us.
Excellent, Peter. Appreciate it very much. You're listening to Master Your Finances. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finance. I'm Kurt Baker here with Peter Crowley, the President and CEO of the Princeton Mercer Regional Chamber of Commerce. And you've done an amazing job using all your banking talents and expertise and kind of moving it into the nonprofit world and growing the Princeton Mercer Regional Chamber into a very large organization from a relatively modest organization, and doing that by bringing in these various very targeted programs and listening to people with ideas, trying them out, and and it's been successful overall. So I think I'd like to talk a little bit about, you have great leadership capabilities, and that's, I've seen that over and over throughout these periods of time. And you want to maybe walk us through a little bit about how you found Christine, so to speak, or she found you. I know you have great employees, and you have the ability to get a lot of productivity, right? They love to come to work. I've talked to all of them, and it's like they like working there, right? I mean, they really do. And it reminds me of my wife when she worked at Merrill years ago. At that time, she worked really hard, but she loved the people she worked with. So it was a great experience, even though they worked really hard. And I kind of envision that's similar to probably what you're envisioning there. So can you walk us a little bit about how you brought in the right talent, and then how you use that talent to kind of grow the organization the way you've been able to do?
Sure, and you've hit the word. You have to build an organization that wants to support you, and the first thing you do is you understand that you work for them. They don't work for you in a small organization. So the story that we had is when I came into the chamber back in 2009, the prior CEO had left abruptly I believe it was in November. So no one had really run it. They'd all been working together for 3 months to keep it going. And I came in January, and the first thing I did was sit with the staff and said, some of you may know me. I was in the Bank of Princeton. I'm an aggressive guy. I said, but let me tell you how we're going to go forward. And I need all of you to be here working with me. We're going to work as a team. I said, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to share in the value of what we do. We're all going to be on the same page. If you don't believe what I'm believing, then you really shouldn't be here. But if you do, my goal is to listen to you guys, to make sure that we're doing the right things and reward you. And I said, you're not going to see this where, all the reward goes to me as the CEO. In fact, I don't think that's the way to go. You're the ones doing the work. So there were 3 staff members that were there. One left because it was not the right thing for her. But the 3 who did stay bought into the model. And the model said, we're going to be a client-focused small business organization that is driven to make a difference. So once they sort of bought into that, then it was a little bit easier, because each person knew I wasn't going to I'm not a person that tells you what to do. I'll give you the goals and I'll give you the direction and I'll work with you, but you're the smart people. You're the ones that are going to make it happen. So each one went on took their own particular area they were good with. Adam Pearl at the time was great with membership. Sherry was great with programming, and Lorraine Holcomb was our financial person. And they worked as a great team. And that's the secret, I think, to any organization from a leadership point of view. You can be called the leader, but that doesn't mean automatically people trust you or want to work with you. You have to gain that trust from them. And I think the people understand very quickly if you're honest and if you mean what you say. And fortunately, I was very fortunate. Everybody stayed with me for a number of years. We have gone through some changes, which are good, because when people left, they went to higher and better jobs. But once you establish your reputation of being an organization that people like to work in, as you mentioned, it's much easier to find good talent. And we've been so successful in finding great talent. I would put our team up against any team in the state in a chamber, and I guarantee we'll come out ahead.
No, I'd have to agree with that. Yeah, no, I know you've always, and I remember hearing stories about in the very beginning when you started, you had to send up mailers, and you guys were all in there stuffing, you were in there stuffing envelopes with everybody else. So it's kind of like just fill the holes, make it happen. And what I heard in there somewhere was somewhat of a mission statement, right? You set out the goals and objectives very clearly. Like, here's how we're going to operate. And then you kind of let them go off and do their thing, right? And then I'm assuming it's some kind of monitoring process to make sure we're kind of staying on track. But it sounded like it more of a relationship than a top-down. Here, this is what you have to go do, right? So you have to kind of let
it
people do
really
things
was,
their own
and
way.
I think you hit the nail on the head. As long as people have clear goals and clear indication what their role is and what they're supposed to do, and everybody knows where those parameters are. So my role is A, your role is B, someone else is C. You don't bump into each other. The other thing we did, which is sort of has become a staple, is we had a Monday morning staff meeting every week. Now that had not been occurring before, and people weren't particularly thrilled that at 9 o'clock every Monday morning we're going to have a staff meeting. Over time, what it did was it allowed everybody to know what they're all doing, so no one felt out of the loop. And as we started to grow the staff from the 4 up to where we are now at 8, we were at 9 at one point, but with COVID, we kind of cut back one. Everybody was very comfortable with the staff meetings. They shared information. We shared all our financials. We shared our successes and our failures. I mean, we had a couple of bloopers there that didn't work real well. I can remember 2 or 3 very clearly. I did most of them myself. But that was the fun part. People could look at me and say, hey, he's screwing up too, but he's still going ahead. And nobody was chided for messing up. No one was chided for making a mistake. If you were chided at all, it was for not trying. And and you're right, there was monitoring, so nobody got really out of their lane too much. But we all shared in the success, and I think that's the catalyst that many companies sometimes don't do. They don't all share in their successes, and and a pat in the back or a dinner or some flowers being sent out, we recognize ongoing what people were doing and thanked them.
Well, it sounds like you're motivating them. I know nonprofits a little bit different than some other organizations, so you're not paying them out commissions and things like that, I assume, based on. So, how do you motivate? It sounds like you've done that through, recognizing them and things like that, because I know they're all very motivated and they love to do what they're doing. So, how do you keep them like engaged and motivated and things like that, and excited, especially in a nonprofit situation where you're really answering to the organ, the members, and things like that, or in our case, it would be donors in our nonprofit. So it's a little bit different how you have to operate, right, as far as how you handle the employment situation than maybe with the banking situation.
It really is, and the one thing that I think very often is a challenge is how do you manage volunteers? So we have well over 200 volunteers that are active in the chamber, many of them on our committees. As I mentioned, we have the 10 different business programs. We also have about 15 different signature events where people get involved. And I think the thing there is you make sure there's a value for them. So and you've been involved in our membership committee. So the value for you is you get to meet some people, talk about what Attitudes in Reverse does, talk about financial planning, but also from the chamber's point of view, talk about an organization that people respect and has a good brand name. So that's where we brought them together. And then what you do is I hate to go back to this word, you respect them. You thank them. You don't you listen to what people are saying. If someone has an idea that's sort of weird, you don't say, no, we're not gonna do that. You talk it through and you try to find out. And I'll tell you with leadership, and I've been through a lot of roles where I've been in a leadership position. Leadership is you can be called a leader, but you cannot be recognized as a leader. I think recognition is the most important part, and that's something you earn every single day when you work with people.
No, I agree with that 100%. So maybe we'll change over a little bit, because I know that you grew this organization from from a financial stability standpoint as well, and I'm sure that's where your banking experience kind of automatically kind of flowed in. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how you really kind of made sure that the organization was financially stable, and how you set up your goals and things like that? I know every time we go to membership committee, we have goals every month that we're trying to hit certain membership goals and things like that, because I think that became very valuable and we'll talk about that next, is how every business has been interrupted this year. But I'm sure that planning that you've been doing over the years really kind of helped you a little bit better than maybe other organizations that maybe weren't quite so prepared. So you want to take us kind of through that long-term planning process that you had as a business to make sure you were going to be profitable and could handle a potential downturn at some point in the future if it happened?
Sure. So the first thing that I did when I came in was put together a strategic plan. And that plan was based on where we were at the time and where we wanted to be in 3 to 5 years. And we did it based on, if we're going to be increasing our revenue, how do we do that? And that means you got to bring value. If we're going to be bringing new programs in, how do you adjust that program to make sure it's successful? So each program that we built had a 6-month break-in period. If it wasn't earning revenue after 6 months, we sat and relooked at it. If it wasn't earning revenue after 12 months, we stopped it. We were very fortunate. Most of our programs started to bring in revenue. Interesting enough, the biggest challenge we had was saying, okay, if you're going to do programming with business segments, is that going to hurt the overall chamber? So let's say you're a real estate agent, you've gone to chamber events, but now we have real estate events. Do you still continue to go? And what we found was not only did people continue to go, but people who were brand new, who didn't understand the chamber, said, well, gee, I'm in the real estate industry, I should be part of the chamber. Or I'm a global company, I should be part of the chamber. Or I'm an entrepreneur, I should be part of the chamber, because they're bringing value to me in those different areas. So we did a 3-year plan. We actually achieved it in a 1.5 years, which was pretty exciting. And we sat down and did another one. But the thing we did, Kurt, for every single program and every single event, we tracked what we were doing on it. Were we making money on it? Was it growing? How much time was it taking? And I'll just give you a quick example. So when I first came in, we had a program that had been there for 20 years. And it was a program that really targeted educators, which is a great group, but wasn't really our focus. And I went to stop it. And I was told by somebody, well, you can't stop it. It's been around for 20 years. And we make money on it. I said, well, tell me how you make money. Well, we get a grant from so-and-so, and that provides us with revenue. So, but how much time do you put in running the program? And after that person evaluated, they realized we were losing almost $18,000 a year, taking the time they're putting into it versus the grant. And it wasn't our target, so we did stop it. And that's how you look at programs. We do that with every program every year, and we share the financials with our staff. So if I'm doing a program and it's not doing well, the staff knows it. And they'll either help me make it better, or they'll say, Peter, time out, time to cancel the program. And that's that whole type of buy-in from the staff and to make the programs work. But you got to watch the numbers. You got to watch financials. We wouldn't hire a new staff member until we knew there was $100,000 ongoing income to cover that salary. And a lot of people say, well, let's hire someone and the money comes in. In banking, you hire the person after the money's come in. And we brought that attitude over.
I would have to agree with that. All right. Well, you've been listening to Master Your Finances. We're going to be right back. Welcome back. You listen to Master Your Finance. I'm Kurt Baker here with Peter Crowley, the President and CEO of the Princeton Mercer Regional Chamber. And you've done an amazing job growing the chamber and really inspiring, the employees to do a great job. And I know businesses love to be a part of the chamber. It's a very positive place to go. I mean, we all have a great time. And what I think is really cool about what you did is there's literally something for everyone, whether you're a sole proprietor or whether you're a large Fortune 500 company in a certain area, pharma, or whatever the case may be. There are different events. In fact, I remember myself when I first came, you had like the breakfast, the luncheon, and then the business after business. Now you have to make decisions. I could almost always go to them, right? But there's so much great stuff going on. You really have to kind of plan out what works best for you and calendar it out and go, that kind of thing. And I know we've had a huge shift for a lot of us. And I know the chamber, we're basically a networking operation, right? We get together, we exchange ideas, we meet people, and we do things together. Well, that becomes significantly harder when you literally can't go to a breakfast, a lunch, or any of these great events that you guys put on. So what happened initially? I know a lot of us were like, I know when I first it happened, I wasn't really even sure what was going on, right? Things kind of changed a little bit. I wasn't even sure if I had to make a change. And then all of a sudden, boom, one day, hey, you can't go to work, or don't go to work unless you absolutely need to. So what happened in the beginning? And then what did you guys do to kind of shift a little bit and come up with the strategy that you're currently implementing now?
So on March 16th, we knew in February something was going to go awry. It was starting to grow. But on March 16th, I believe it was a Monday, we all went remote. Now, we had built a program because of storms and other things in the winter to always be able to work remote. So it wasn't a change in our system. We just pushed a button and everything went remote. So if you were to call the chamber today and go to my extension, it rings to my phone. So that was the easy part. The difficult part was, who are we going to be? And for the first month, we really felt that our job was to get information to our clients. So we changed the whole website. We changed the whole focus. It was really an information disseminating approach. We had links to a number of organizations that in the past we had to link to. We were doing daily updates on what's happening. And then during that time, we said, okay, we can't do this forever because it's going to get boring. How do we change what we've done? And we realized it's going to be virtual, and it's going to be virtual for a while. And we quickly went on a platform. We actually went to Zoom. We looked at about 4 or 5 other platforms. Zoom was, at the time for us, the best platform. And I think we launched our first virtual event, which was a business after business event, about a month later. And Christine Kerner, who runs that program, actually created a Zoom where you could go and break up into networking rooms. You could do, so you'd come into, like, the 80 people would come into the group, and then we'd break off into breakout rooms of 8 to 10 people where you could interface and network. And that was really the first time we realized this works, because Christine had about 80 people. They all loved it. They sent us out saying, we appreciate it, because no networking had been going on. Since then, we've actually switched every single event, except for 1 or 2 that were really outdoor events, like Midsummer Marketing, into virtual events. We were very thrilled that our Women of Achievement program had almost 150 attendees, and we actually charged for it. So the next step was, okay, you're doing great events. How do we get some money? Because the chamber we had no revenue coming in, and we have a lot of expenses. What we realized was, people, if you do it professionally and you educate and inform them, they will pay for that. So we've now been able to sort of pivot what we do to bring value. It isn't the same. There's not the emotion. So you and I know each other. We've had an emotional connection for a long time. That's sort of missing when you do it on a Zoom or do it on a Google or do it on a platform. I can see your face. I can see all these faces, and we can talk and interact, but there's that ability that we don't have to be emotionally connected. And I think the chamber was built on that networking and emotional connection. I don't think it's going to come back for at least the next 12 months, honestly, until we have a vaccine. So we've redone our finances. We've looked at how we're going to be profitable, how we're going to stay valuable. And we think we've got the right model, but it's taken a hit. And I'll tell you, I'm a lucky business. I had a reserve. There are many, many of our clients, and we work with many of them who are struggling to get by. Restaurants, hospitality, small businesses, diversity-owned businesses. They're the ones that really need support. So I would just ask your audience, I know you got a huge audience with this program, please, please, please buy local. Go to a local restaurant, get takeout, buy some gift cards from a store going forward. They need your support now more than ever. And I will tell you, that's, communities are built on local businesses. Please make sure you support them.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I know that we've, even like my wife, she can go get her hair done. So she started buying, when she would normally go to the hairdresser, she just started buying the gift packages.
Yeah.
And she goes, I'll eventually use them.
A lot of our clients have done that. So right. You could go to restaurants and you can buy a gift package. I had a gentleman call me from, this is again how it works. He called me from California. He said, my dad's 88 years old. He lives in Princeton. Could you give me a good restaurant? He loves steak that I could have a meal sent to him. So I gave him 3 restaurants. He chose one, and he sent me back to the nicest. I said, gotta tell you. So my dad was so thrilled. He said, this restaurant, not only, we told him it was his 88th birthday. They sent dessert. They sent someone out with a card. His father was so thrilled. He was so thrilled, and the restaurant was happy. A win-win across the board. And that's what we do. Our goal is to make sure that we're supporting our businesses and bringing them with these opportunities. But it is, no doubt, it is difficult now. It's going to be difficult going forward. And the viewers that listen to your show, the people that are out there, please, you can use Amazon if you want once in a while, but don't neglect going to a local store, that local hardware store, your local craft store. It's important.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, I've heard numbers like 2 out of 3 restaurants may not be returning, depending on how long this goes on. And that's going to be tough when we really can get back out there again. I know we've done some limited going out, And if there's a half a dozen people in the restaurant, it's a lot. It's just not, it's limited on what they can do. And it's a pretty large place. So the more we can do and the more takeout we can do, the more we can support them, because many of us are fortunate where it hasn't really impacted us significantly. So we can continue to spend, and we have to remember to do that, because if you're staying home, you may not necessarily remember that. So can you want to tell us a little bit about what adjustments you made? I know we're going virtual. And I know just from a member standpoint, I thought it was kind of interesting. Like I was at that first BAB, and I made a connection who ended up being on the show later on, and we went off site, and we went, kind of off camera, so to speak, right? So it's a little different, but in some ways it's not different, because you're making those connections, and then depending on who that person is, you can take that offline, right? So after the BAB, so to speak, we had further conversations after that. And continue them, because as you point out, those virtual rooms, you're in there for like a couple minutes each person. You're talking to one-on-one, and then there's a place where you can go and talk about your business, which is great. And so it does work, and the way you guys have set it up is really pretty cool. So what kind of, I know you got good feedback, so I know that we're using it just a little bit differently we did before. You have to make sure, in my opinion, that you continue those conversations afterwards. So it's not just the networking, like in any networking event, you have to make sure you take those names and those companies that you might do business with and continue to have those conversations with them after. That's where you gain the value, is on those long-term relationships, building something afterwards.
Yeah, it really is, Kurt. And we've made a bunch of changes. We've looked at a bunch of platforms. We've actually purchased a new platform from Toronto, which we never would have thought of before, for our conference for women, which will allow us to have a virtual exhibit hall. It'll allow us to have virtual breakout rooms. It'll be different. So, we've been able to go and, again, listening to what our clients want, find those ways to make one-on-one connections. It's a little bit difficult in the larger groups. So, when we used to have 300 or 400 or 500 people come to an event, our real estate event or our women's in business event or our gala, that's been changing. But now we have to be creative. So on our Women of Achievement program, we worked with a company that allowed us to pre-record it, but we were able to deliver the awards to people's homes, bring them in, had our speakers talk, and it becomes just challenging. But that's what successful entrepreneurs do. And I'm guessing many of the entrepreneurs and the small businesses that are listening to your show today are saying, I had to change too. I've got to make differences. I've got to change those things. And I'll give you one quick story. One individual I talked to, I asked him, what was the biggest challenge you had with pivoting your business? He goes, fear. I was fearful on Monday morning I'd be out of business if I didn't do something different. And this particular person went and changed what he was doing to go more into PPE equipment, doing face shields, doing shields for cashiers. And he's found it's a whole new part of his business. So in challenges, there are opportunities. And the point is, you got to understand the old make lemonade out of lemons. You got what you've got in front of you. You need to take those pieces and put them together.
Oh, I agree 100%. In fact, I talk about this a lot now, is that what we're doing right now, we're doing this over video conferencing. I mean, 6 months ago, I maybe used it once or twice ever that I needed to use it. Everything was done in person or on the phone. I think most of us are very, very comfortable with it because we were kind of forced into it, and companies were kind of forced. If they didn't, you're good because you had a lot of stuff set up ahead of time. But many of us had to go in and say, okay, I know I have these capabilities. I've never used them. Let's turn it on, figure out how to use it, start using it. And now I think people are much more comfortable with that aspect of it. And another thing you point out that's very important is that anytime there's a change, there's an opportunity there. So you can look at it and say, oh my gosh, this part of my business went away for whatever reason, but there are still needs out there, and there's talents that you have and capabilities you have that may fit into there. So by listening to your customers, you can pivot and change. I know some of our restaurants were starting to sell things directly, right? And they were doing more delivery, and they were doing more other things that they do more outdoor things. So there are things that can be done if we look at it more as from an opportunity perspective instead of as a decline or something that's negative. It can be a positive, actually, right?
I agree, 100%.
Yeah. So you're listening to Master Your Finances. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm Kurt Baker here with Peter Crowley, the president and CEO of the Princeton Mercer Regional Chamber of Commerce. And we've gone through a lot of what he's been doing, including making some adjustments for COVID, which a lot of businesses have had to do. I mean, I think it was great that you already had your system in place in case of a storm outage, which I think was very forward thinking in of itself. So when this occurred, that sounds like the banker in you coming out to me.
Yeah, you might be right.
Right. Is what that just sounded like. The financial services have to have these things in place. So that's great. So that was in place. So, but you had to figure out your new model. And I know I've been part of that. So it's working very well, considering the fact that you're literally an in-person networking organization is what most business owners like look forward to. I mean, we love going to these events and seeing each other and meeting new people and making business connections and personal connections. And now a lot of that's being done online. But I have to say that, you know, we're doing it online, but we're still, I know people are still meeting like outside of it. We're doing things. So it still works. It still definitely works. And you made some additional investments. So I think a lot of this, you know, learning how to deal with these things has a lot to do with experience. Do you want to talk a little bit about like how you develop your like the mentoring aspect of it or the advisory aspect of it? Because I know those of that are in business, you can't learn it all on your own, and I think it's really important to understand how this expertise kind of fits into growing a business or an organization or yourself even over time. So what are your thoughts about that? And
Yeah, I think one of the things that people underestimate is the real success that using a mentor has. I was very fortunate, and I use the story that someone once told me when you're in a larger company, which I was in for a while, and they're in a room thinking of who's going to get promoted. You're not in that room to talk about yourself. It's other people who will say, "Gee, I know Peter Crowley, or I know Kurt Baker," and they're the ones that are going to make the decisions on you getting promoted. I was very fortunate in that I've had some really strong mentors, some I didn't even know about. They were people behind the scenes who would do things that sort of help protect me or cover up for me when I needed that and feed back to me what was going on. And I remember I had a number of discussions that I look back upon and I walked away saying, crap, I'm getting yelled at, when it was really very creative to criticism that I needed. So you look at sports stars, basketball players, golfers, and business, they all use mentors. I've been fortunate that I've had mentors both in my family that have been business people that mentored me, but clearly, if you're young and starting out, find a mentor, find someone who knows you, who you trust, and who can tell you good and bad. As you and I both talked about, you'll learn a lot from your mistakes. You learn a lot from things you didn't do well, and someone's got to tell you that until you find out it's too late, and then you're really in trouble. But when you go in the chamber, you've got mentors and you've got, I'll call them consultants. There's a difference. Consultants are the ones who want to tell you what to do. So you got a board of consultants. You got a lot of members who are consultants. Mentors are the ones that will pull you aside and say, Peter, you know what? I got to tell you, you're not doing this right. Here's where you're missing it. And they have to establish that trust. So when you walk in a room and talk to them one-on-one, you know what they're saying is true, and they're not trying to be nasty, they're not trying to be mean, they're trying to be helpful. And if you don't have that, it's really hard, because if you don't have people who are working with you or with mentors who are helping you, then when that discussion occurs about who gets a salary increase, who gets promoted, if no one knows you, you don't get the verbiage. And I'll give you an example. I've been in meetings many times where I've had a person I wanted to advocate for, and the first thing I would say was, well, let's say, do you all know Jim Smith? And they all, yeah, we know Jim, because I've done a good job of advocating for Jim. If I were to say, Jim Smith, who's he? No one in the room knows him. That person's not going to ever get ahead. The other thing that mentors do that is really important is they can help you get on a path you didn't know to be on. I'll give you some examples. When I first came into the chamber, I had some ideas I thought were great. Let's do this and let's do that. Well, the first year or so, 3/4 of the ideas were dumb, because I was bringing it from my banking career and not listening to what I'm now in, which was a nonprofit world. And luckily, I had folks who would tell me, hey, Peter, that didn't work. Now, I may have known it didn't work, but was too ashamed to say that was a mess. So having someone who you trust, having someone who you can talk to, and it can be a partner, it can be a spouse, it can be your board chair, the chair of your board of directors, but that's an important role. And as an up and coming young individual in a company or in your own business, there are peer groups and businesses that will help you. I know a number of companies have organizations where you can join it, and your peers will tell you what you're doing right or wrong. Very important and needed long term in your career. I've always leveraged my peers to my success.
I think you bring up a lot of important points. And I think one of the things I've learned through the chamber, interestingly enough, is they don't necessarily have to be in your industry to help you with looking at what you might be doing. I know I've had these conversations both ways. Like I've made suggestions to people and they've made suggestions to me where you talk about your business and what you're doing and how you're doing it. And they may see something that you're too close to, like you pointed out, right? Like you're like, oh, you're right. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Because sometimes we kind of get in this myopic vision of what's going on, and we keep doing it because that's the way it was done. Kind of like your 20-year program that the chamber that you ended up saying, well, let's kind of look at it from a different angle. It's not really making us money. And a lot of us get into the business, whether you're young or whether you're more developed, this is the way we do it, right? Sometimes we get into this. This is the way it's always been done. Maybe we need to have an outside look at it. And I know that I think the chamber has been really good at connecting us with different people, either in our industry or outside of our industries, that help us look at our own business and our own personal way of handling things and being much more efficient in what we do.
Yeah, and I remember a case of an individual who I tend to be more of an A personality. This person was an A personality. And the first couple of times we met, we didn't hit it off. I mean, at one point it was almost, hell, get out of my office. But what I realized very quickly was this gentleman was very smart. He had a lot of good ideas. He may not be able to address them correctly in how you talk to me, but over time we realized it was important that we both work together. He's become a good friend, and that is also important. Make sure you've got good friends, and they're not in your industry. They're not I mean, you, Kurt, you and I have known each other. I consider you a friend. What you do with Attitudes in Reverse is unbelievable. The impact you have. It is an emotional impact that I tell people about, and sometimes I get emotional on it because you're saving lives. I'm helping businesses grow. You're saving lives, and that's a really important thing to do.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. So I think the coaching is really important, the mentoring is important, and the networking is important. So we gain our expertise and we kind of look forward in what we're doing and the best ways to do it. So can you tell us maybe a few things that you've learned from some of these that maybe you hadn't thought about before when they talk to you? Like, hey, I didn't really notice that before you brought it up to me.
Yeah, I'll tell you the first thing I learned, and I'll never forget it. And it was a long time ago. I learned that I better listen more. I'm 27, 28 years old. I'm a vice president in a large company. I've done relatively well. And I'm thinking, well, I know what I need to do. I know you guys should listen to me. And some good people sat me down and said, you're a smart person. You're not listening. You're not listening to what's going on. You're going to blow yourself up. And they were 1000% right. I learned to listen. I also learned to acknowledge and thank people. I didn't do that really well when I first started off. So, learning to listen, learning to recognize people, learning that they're the ones that are important, not you. And it's not that you have to be the one to make the decision, but if you get a conglomerate working with you, a group of people, give them the praise. Let them know what's important, because you'll go along with what their successes are. So I learned that. I learned to really share in my success with other people. And in a competitive environment like I was in my banking world, and I was younger, there's a lot of people vying for those next roles. Some people recognize when you're working as a team, and they recognize someone who's being a pain, who's just for themselves. And over time, that can be deadly. And I learned to understand it's working as a team is a lot more important than trying to be the one person making everything happen.
And I've heard that before. I'm sure many people have. Is it one negative person can bring down a whole team, and it just no matter how quote talented they are, if they're not adding to the team, they can literally bring the whole thing down. So it's really important to be an add-on and in adding into that by recognizing others and really kind of promoting the team being successful, right? And that's why I think it's great at the chamber. You guys have these overall goals. As I said, the membership committee, we have numbers we're trying to hit, and we're doing our best to try to bring in people on these levels. And we know that converts into cash flow for the chamber. So we do the best we can. So it's a very clear goal, right? And it's a very clear thing that the team is trying to do.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is too, that you learn over time that you take a long-term view. It's not going to, I remember once I was being chided for doing something dumb in banking, and my boss at the time, who was a very, very analytical guy, and I'm not overly analytical, and you don't have to be the same boss to be good, took me outside the building I was in, which is down on Wall Street, and said, "What do you see?" Turn me around. So, what do you mean? "What do you see?" "Well, I saw this huge brick building with iconic columns." He said, "Peter, it's been there for 100 years. It'll be there in 100 years from now. Don't try to rebuild it. Just try to work around it." And I remember that thinking, okay, my job isn't to go change the world. It's to put some building blocks in place. And we've done that at the chamber. Someone will come in after me and take my building blocks and hopefully not destroy them, but add to it. And that kind of additional work is what success is really built on.
Well, Peter, you've done an amazing job. Any last thoughts before we go? I know you've done a fantastic job there.
Yeah, I think that the cool part is the region has done very well. Our business has done very well. And the successes that we've made are the team. It's not just me. It's our team. I could not have done that without, Alice and Sherry and Rory and Gina and Casey and Adam and all the people that have been able to work with me and our board. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I've got a board whose chairs have been so supportive of what I wanted to do. And they say it takes a village. Okay, it takes a community, and they are absolutely right. It takes everyone working together, and as a leader, you want to be part of that. You want to be the drive. You don't want to be the driver. You want to be part of that and get everybody else work together.
Excellent,
so thank
Peter.
you very much for letting me come on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Peter. We very much appreciate you coming on. You can subscribe to this podcast at masteryourfinances.us. Remember, together we can master your finances so you can enjoy financial peace of mind.